In a kingdom nestled between rolling hills and ancient forests, there lived a wise and benevolent king who found himself entangled in a long and bitter war with the neighboring realms. The conflict had begun over disputed territories, but as seasons changed and years passed, the true cause became lost in the fog of war, remembered only in dusty scrolls and the whispered tales of elderly courtiers. What remained was the constant clash of armies, the worry etched deep in the king's face, and the growing shadow of danger that crept ever closer to the castle walls. The king's greatest treasure was not the crown jewels locked away in the royal vault, nor the vast lands he ruled, but his beloved queen. She was known throughout the realm not only for her remarkable beauty, with eyes that sparkled like morning dew and hair that cascaded like a golden waterfall, but also for her kind heart and gentle wisdom. Together they had weathered many storms, but now, as enemy forces gathered like storm clouds on the horizon, the king faced his most difficult decision. After many sleepless nights spent pacing the castle's torch-lit corridors, the king summoned his queen to the private royal chambers. The morning sun filtered through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the stone floors as he took her delicate hands in his weathered ones. "My dearest," he began, his voice heavy with emotion, "the enemy draws closer each day, and I can no longer guarantee your safety within these walls." He spoke of a secret stronghold, deep within the ancient forest that bordered their kingdom, a castle so well hidden that even he had visited it only once, guided by his most trusted forest scouts. The queen's heart grew heavy as she realized what her husband was asking of her. "Please," she begged, tears gathering in her eyes like precious pearls, "do not send me away. Let me stay by your side. If our kingdom falls, let us face that fate together." Her words echoed off the chamber walls, each plea striking the king's heart like an arrow. But his resolve, though pained, remained firm as stone. The following dawn, as the first rays of sunlight painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, a royal carriage stood ready in the courtyard. The queen, dressed in traveling clothes that could not hide her regal bearing, made one last attempt to change her husband's mind. The king, however, gently helped her into the carriage, promising to visit whenever the tides of war allowed. They both knew, though neither spoke it aloud, that such promises were as fragile as autumn leaves in the wind. For the forest stronghold lay so deep within the wilderness that only those with exceptional knowledge of its secret paths could hope to find it. The journey to the hidden castle was long and arduous. Though the queen traveled in stages to preserve her strength, each mile that separated her from her beloved husband felt like a physical pain in her chest. The escort of royal guards maintained a respectful distance, understanding that their queen needed space to process her grief. When they finally reached the stronghold, the queen found a structure that seemed to have grown from the forest itself. Ancient stone towers rose between massive trees, their walls covered in climbing vines and wild roses. In another time, she might have found it enchanting, but now it felt more like a prison than a sanctuary. As days turned to weeks, the queen tried to find solace in exploring her new surroundings. She wandered through the castle's empty halls, her footsteps echoing off stone walls that held centuries of silence. The windows offered views of a landscape so vast and empty that it made her feel like the last person in the world. Rolling plains stretched to the horizon, broken only by clusters of dark trees and the occasional lonely boulder. "How different this is from my beloved home," she would whisper to herself, standing at the highest tower window, where her castle had been full of life, courtiers bustling through corridors, musicians playing in the great hall, gardens filled with the laughter of children. This place seemed frozen in time, as if waiting for something that would never come. Though the king wrote faithfully every day, sending letters filled with encouraging news about the war's progress and his undying love, the queen's melancholy grew deeper with each passing sunset. The letters, carried by swift messengers who knew the secret forest paths, became both her greatest joy and deepest sorrow, a reminder of everything she had left behind. After months of isolation, the queen began to formulate a plan. If she couldn't have permission to return, she would make her own way back to her husband's side. She was no longer content to be a passive player in her own story. During her time in the stronghold, she had observed the hunting parties that occasionally gathered in the surrounding forests, and an idea took root in her clever mind. When the queen offered to have her husband pay any ransom the witch desired, the creature's eyes gleamed with an unsettling light. "I have no need for gold or jewels," she declared. "But I do need company. The forest can be so lonely." With these words, the lion witch underwent a terrifying transformation, her body shifting and changing until she took the form of a massive lioness. Before the queen could scream, the beast had scooped her up and bounded away into the depths of the forest. The witch's lair was unlike anything the queen had ever seen or imagined. A vast staircase of 10,000 steps led down into the earth, each step seeming to take them further from the world of light and warmth. The only illumination came from strange, eternal lamps whose light reflected off a lake of quicksilver, creating an otherworldly glow that made everything seem unreal. In this underground realm, monsters swam in the metallic waters, their forms so horrifying that the queen had to look away to maintain her sanity. Ravens and screech owls, birds of ill omen, filled the stagnant air with their harsh cries, creating a constant cacophony of despair. In the distance loomed a mountain that the witch called the Mount of Lovers' Tears, where a slow stream of sorrow flowed from its peak, fed by the weeping of every broken heart in the world. The vegetation in this subterranean world was as twisted as its mistress. No healthy trees or flowers grew here. Instead, the ground was covered with thorns, nettles, and poisonous weeds. The only food available was what the witch provided: bitter roots, horse chestnuts, and thorn apples, barely enough to sustain life, but not enough to provide any pleasure or satisfaction. When the queen had recovered enough strength to stand, the lion witch informed her of her fate. "You will build yourself a dwelling here," she commanded, "for this is to be your home until the end of your days." The queen's heart, already heavy with sorrow, seemed to shatter at these words. "What crime have I committed," she sobbed, "to deserve such a punishment? If my death would please you, then I beg you to end my life now, for I cannot bear the thought of never seeing my beloved husband again." But the lion witch merely laughed at her tears, telling her that if she wished to avoid an even worse fate, she would learn to please her new mistress. "And how am I to do that?" the queen asked, her voice hollow with despair. "I have a great craving for fly pastries," the witch declared, her eyes glinting maliciously. "You will catch flies and bake them into a delicious pie for me." The queen looked around at the gloomy cavern in disbelief. "But there are no flies here," she protested. "And even if there were, there is barely enough light to see them. Besides, I have never made pastry in my life. You ask the impossible." The lion witch's face darkened like a storm cloud. "Impossible or not, it is what I want, and what I want I shall have." Knowing that arguing would only make her situation worse, the queen retreated to the shelter of a gnarled yew tree. There she gave full voice to her grief, her tears joining the endless stream that flowed from the mountain of lovers' tears. "Oh, my beloved husband," she wept, "what will you think when you go to the forest castle and find me gone? Will you believe me dead, or worse, faithless to our love? When they find my overturned chariot and the clothes I wore to please you, will you mourn my death? And after you have mourned, will you find comfort in another's arms? Perhaps it is better that I am trapped here, where I will never have to know if another takes my place in your heart." As she sat lost in her melancholy thoughts, a raven's harsh cry echoed through the cavern, seeming to mock her sorrow. But little did the queen know that this very raven would play a crucial role in the next chapter of her story. She summoned the castle's master craftsman and commissioned a special hunting chariot designed to be managed by a single person. "I wish to join the hunt," she explained, her voice steady despite the lie. "But I find the traditional carriages too cumbersome." The craftsman, honored by the royal commission, created a masterpiece of engineering, small but sturdy, with lightweight wheels and a specially designed harness system for the horses. The queen spent weeks learning to handle the chariot, practicing in the castle's courtyard before venturing into the surrounding meadows. She learned to read the movements of her horses, to anticipate their reactions, and to guide them with subtle touches of the reins. The guards and servants smiled to see their queen finding a new interest, never suspecting her true intentions. As her skill grew, she began joining local hunting parties, always staying close to the hounds and gradually pushing her horses to greater speeds. She earned a reputation for being an enthusiastic hunter, though in truth, each expedition was merely practice for her planned escape. She studied the positions of the sun, the patterns of the stars, and the growth of the moss on trees, slowly building her knowledge of forest navigation. When she felt ready, the queen announced her wish to organize a grand hunt. She arranged for different hunting parties to spread out across the forest, claiming this strategy would prevent any prey from escaping. She dressed herself with particular care that morning, choosing a gown of forest green embroidered with silver thread. Her hat, adorned with feathers from exotic birds, complemented her outfit perfectly, and precious gems sparkled at her throat and wrists. If she was to be reunited with her king, she wanted to look as beautiful as the day he had sent her away. As the hunting horn sounded and the hounds began their chase, the queen waited for her moment. When the excitement of the hunt reached its peak and the other riders were distracted by a deer's trail, she turned her chariot toward what she believed was the direction of home. She urged her horses forward, first at a canter, then a gallop, her heart racing as fast as the hooves beneath her. But the forest had other plans. The horses, sensing their riders' excitement and anxiety, became increasingly difficult to control. They ran faster and faster, their hooves barely touching the ground, until the trees became a blur of green and brown. The queen's confidence turned to terror as she realized she had lost all control of her team. "What madness possessed me?" she cried out, her voice lost in the wind. "These horses are too strong, too wild. Oh, what have I done? My dear husband sent me away to protect me, and now I have thrown away that protection through my own foolishness." Her cries echoed through the forest, but there was no one to hear them. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion, yet too fast to prevent. The chariot's wheel caught on a protruding tree root, and the vehicle lurched violently to one side. The queen was thrown from her seat, but her foot became entangled in the wheel's spokes. By some miracle, she survived the accident, though she lay unconscious at the base of an ancient oak tree, her face streaked with blood from a cut on her forehead. When consciousness returned, the queen found herself looking up at a figure that seemed to have stepped out of a nightmare. A woman of enormous stature stood over her, but this was no ordinary giantess. She wore nothing but a lion's skin draped across her massive frame, the tawny fur contrasting with her wild, unkempt hair, which was tied back with what appeared to be the dried skin of a snake. The snake's head hung over her shoulder like a grotesque ornament, its dead eyes seeming to stare at the queen. In one massive hand, she gripped a club made from a single piece of stone, and a quiver full of crude arrows hung at her side. The queen, her mind still clouded from the fall, wondered if she had died, and this was some fearsome guardian of the afterlife. "If this is death," she murmured, "then it is more terrifying than any tale could have prepared me for." The giantess's laughter boomed through the forest like thunder, causing nearby birds to take flight in panic. "Death? Oh no, my pretty queen. You're very much alive, though whether that's a blessing or a curse remains to be seen. I am the Lion Witch, and you have stumbled into my domain.